Hello, everyone, and welcome to Our Eyes on Indie. My name is Finn,
And my name is Michael.
and it is our absolute pleasure to bring you our review of Inkbound, a multiplayer tactical RPG roguelite developed and published by Shiny Shoe, the same studio behind Monster Train. And like Monster Train, this is an online ugly roguelite, so that may have you concerned, but we can assure you Inkbound has a lot going on its pages. So get out your ink and quill, and let's dive in. In Inkbound, you play as a needless, a being made of ink from the ink sea, unable to speak and looked down on by the Inkbound and most of the inhabitants of the Athenium, which serves as the primary hub and social spot in Inkbound. Much like the tower in Destiny, you're able to see other players here, do lots of different things, talk to some NPCs, and of course prep for the runs you're going to be getting into. Now, you're bound to a quill, a sort of spirit that is, well, a quill tip, and is what allows you to interact and dive through the ink sea and the different stories that you are planning to recover. You're tasked by the gatekeeper to head into these books, defeat a villain, and get the ink and restore these stories to eventually save the entirety of the stories inside the Athenium. Now, besides the overarching main plot, there are some side stories with the aspects of old and what exactly happened to them, as well as the NPCs having different motivations, different things they want to do to help, and even finding some lost items and vestiges that used to be powerful artifacts for those living in the Athenium and keeping the balance of the world. Now, there are also seasonal quests, but those don't provide too much story. They are mainly there for XP with the season pass, which we'll get into more later. Now, the plot overall, it's an expanded game. It's kind of a games as a service thing. We will not lie to you. It's also an early access, so it's going to be updated as it goes on. Their next major update is coming in August. But for now, the way the story is going and what it has setting up has me super intrigued at what could be coming. The questions it's made me ask about why am I doing these things? Because it brings into account that you're going into these runs over and over and over again, fighting the same bosses over and over and over again. So, how much is actually being accomplished here? Overall, I've enjoyed the story so far. Roguelite with a story is a great time for me.
So now on to gameplay. Each run in Inkbound currently starts with you picking one of the 5 available classes. After picking your class, you then go on to pick which run style you want to do. There are 2 different styles of runs. One is ranked, and the other is unranked. An unranked run consists of your normal roguelike mechanics where you go through, kill enemies, level up, gain items, and then usually die. There isn't too much overarching meta progression throughout runs except for the quest system. Ranked runs, however, consist more of strategy and require more thought on what your build is going to be. In ranked runs, there are more modifiers that the enemies have that give them buffs and make it harder to kill them. The more ranked runs you do and win, increase your rank, which then increases the modifiers and how drastic of a modifier they are. After you've determined which kind of run you want to do, either ranked or unranked, you then have to go pick which boss you want to face. Currently in the game, there are 3 bosses to choose from, each with its own unique art style and fighting mechanics. My current favorite boss is probably the giant tentacle monster that you just have to kill all the tentacles and then you can finally damage the main boss. After picking which boss you want to choose, you then start your adventure. This is where you get to pick which book you want to go into. There are currently 5 books available in Inkbound, each one with a different atmosphere, different environment, and different enemy types. At the end of each book, there is a mini-boss. Each mini-boss is obviously different, and they are like normal enemies, except cracked out of their mind. Once you kill the first book's mini-boss, you then move on to an intermediate area where you can pick one of 3 more books, and then move on after that like normal. However, after completing the second book, that is when you move on to the final boss. The final boss is the guy you picked at the beginning before you went into any of the books. After defeating the final boss and completing any quests along the way, you then return to the Athenium, which is the hub area for Inkbound. The only deviation in runs applies to ranked runs, which have modifiers on each book before you go in, giving all of the enemies a stat boost. Other than that, the entire run is going to be the same as an unranked run, except the enemies are going to be more annoying and challenging. And how could I even forget the primary things that make your run, well, a run? This would include your vestiges, augments, bindings, and ascensions. Your vestiges are the items you acquire throughout a run. These can be simple stats as you apply burn when you hit an enemy, or as awesome as plus 100% crit chance. Your augments consist of minor upgrades or even major upgrades to your bindings, which are your abilities. They could be as simple as either giving you increased damage or increased crit chance, or as awesome as decreasing cooldown or cost of the ability, or even giving it 2 charges. This brings me to the other bindings or abilities that you can acquire throughout a run. Next to your normal abilities, you have 2 free slots which grant you the opportunity to collect run-specific abilities. These abilities can also take augments to them, and they can be game-changing abilities. My 2 personal favorite bindings that you can acquire throughout a run are Blink, which is a teleport ability, and Pilfer, which is a stealing ability. It lets me steal money from my enemies and keep it. The final additive, which can make either a build perfect or close to it, is the Ascension mechanic. The Ascension mechanic allows you to ascend one of your bindings or abilities to the next level. These are usually drastic changes to the ability, which change how you use it and in what situations. One of my favorite ascensions is for Blink, which I said was one of my favorite bindings, and it allows me to reset Blink every time I blink to somebody and then kill them. Very good for a few of the classes, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Now that you understand how a run works in Inkbound, let's actually dive into how combat works in Inkbound. A combat begins when you come to the circular arena and click the symbol in the center. As soon as you do that, enemies are going to spawn and they are going to show you what their attacks are going to be for the next turn. Attacks fall into 3 different categories: unavoidable, AoE, and single target. Unavoidable attacks hit you no matter where you are in the arena, and the only way to prevent them is to defeat the opponent using that ability. Single target abilities are going to hit whoever attacked that enemy last. So if you're playing in multiplayer, you have a way to trade off the aggro and say give it to an obelisk player if you're playing as a moss cloak. Now, there are also ways to avoid them using evasion or stealth, but that, of course, requires you to have the bindings that give you those status effects. Now, AoE attacks are the easiest to dodge. You get out of the purple zone, and you are all good and safe. So, how are you actually able to deal damage to your opponents? Well, you have willpower, which are attuned to action points in this game. On your turn, you're able to spend action points moving, using bindings, and in one boss fight, there is actually another thing to use action points for. So, with your action points, you can move. Movement is free flowing. You have circles that start from around your character and expand outward. Each of those circles going outward has an increased will cost to move into that circle. So, there's a small circle around your character that costs 0 willpower. You can move freely within a small radius. Going outside of that costs 1 willpower. You can move anywhere within that radius, and so on and so forth. So it's important to position yourself because attacks are going to be coming at you, but also you want to be able to line up your attacks to hit more than one enemy most of the time. Now, when it comes to actually using your bindings, this also gets into the classes here. So each class in Inkbound falls into different categories. There are 5 currently available right now. These aspects are everything from melee to a mage to ranger-esque rogue ninja thing, and each of them is able to do specific things. Each class has a basic binding that is going to have no cooldown and costs 1 willpower. The other 2 are a bit more nuanced and special. Each of them is going to have a cooldown, and sometimes they even have an increased willpower cost. For example, the Magma Miner has Bonk, Leap, and Smash. Bonk has no cooldown and costs 1 AP. It's a simple attack. Then you have the Leap, which has a cooldown but still costs 1 willpower. Finally, you have Smash, which has a longer cooldown and costs 2 willpower. So you see how this goes. The more powerful ability is going to be that third one typically, and combos together well with your other 2 on those classes. So When you're using these bindings, you're thinking, okay, I have this much willpower left. Do I need to move in to actually hit people? Is it worth moving in? Am I able to get out? What can I do here? And so all these things come together to make combat more interesting, especially in multiplayer. Because in multiplayer, you can actually use that movement to your advantage. For example, the Moss Cloak and the Clairvoyant aspects both have things that affect allies or are affected by allies. The Moss Cloak's dash gains additional charges of shuriken for passing through allies and enemies, so you can actually free flow move. And before you confirm your action, without spending any willpower, you can stand there. Your friend can dash through you and gain an extra charge. With the clairvoyant, the same is true with the telekinesis ability, being able to pass through and give shields to your allies before they actually have to confirm their willpower. So remembering to keep some free movement and keep at least one willpower to do the free movement before you spend your last willpower on an ability is important to remember. Now, the other thing that could be a little difficult in multiplayer is juggling orbs. Orbs spawn every single round in Inkbound, and each orb does the following: it gives you one willpower and lowers the cooldown of your currently on cooldown bindings by one. Now, these are shared between players, which means not everyone is able to get them. For example, when Michael and I have played, there have been times where we're like, hey, do you need this orb? Because I could really use it. And we trade off and go, okay, you really need it to get this combo or to get out of that. You take that orb. I'll find another way to deal with it. But in single player, obviously, you could just take all the orbs and do what you want with them. But it's a great system that rewards you for positioning better and allows you to go above and beyond your current capabilities from your class, as well as the vestiges you currently have equipped. Now, vestiges, I know Michael talked about them a bit, but man, the stuff they do in combat is wild. From making sure you always have more will at the start of every turn to making it whenever you pick up an orb, maybe it no longer lowers your cooldown, but gives you more willpower so you can just go ballistic on them. And man, the classes in this game, touched on them briefly already, but they are awesome. I'm a huge fan of the Weaver. The Weaver is basically the magic class in this game besides the Clairvoyant. And what the Weaver is all about is weaving enemies together. Your basic ability threads them. When you thread everyone together, you get a buff to your max will every turn. But also, it empowers your other abilities. The second ability, you can spec to be able to hit everyone for a lot of damage or just be a big single target pull. And then the third ability is all about dealing more damage based on the amount of enemies you already have threaded. So just on that one class alone, you see how unique they are here. For example, the clairvoyant as well is super unique in that none of your attacks are from you, they're from a ball that you throw around the battlefield and you want to position to throw to this guy, but then you want to pulse here and you want to make sure the passive damage goes off. But then you got some more simple ones too, like the obelisk. The obelisk is a tank, not able to deal a lot of damage with its basic ability, but is able to take so much punishment that it is phenomenal because of the fact that even though its actual damage abilities have long cooldowns, you're going to be able to make it and withstand anything. Now, the other thing with combat is when it comes to villains, they have a phase on their health bar. When you hit that phase area, the boss becomes immune to every single form of damage and will cleanse all debuffs on them. That means any kind of poison, fire, bleed, it all goes away. And this is kind of nice. I enjoyed this a lot. I like it when a boss can't exactly be bursted down right away. That can feel a little lame sometimes. There are obviously differences. I know a lot of people in Diablo enjoy it when you can just one-shot a boss, but I think in a turn-based roguelite like this, it is important to not be able to burst it down. That just ruins some of the fun. But combat, it's awesome. It's great. It's complicated enough to where I'm always thinking on my feet. And while not as easy as, say, checkers, it's more attuned to chess. It's by no means going to make your brain mess. There's another huge and important aspect to any good roguelike game, and that's your meta progression. And the meta progression, Inkbound, is honestly one of my favorites because it all revolves around doing quests for different NPCs in the game. I touched on this briefly earlier when I was talking about plot, where characters will talk about old aspects or perhaps items they've missed and old characters, and they're kind of wondering what happened to those things. And you get tasked by going out and doing those things for them. Now, typically these tasks simply revolve around you going to a certain area and interacting with the thing, getting a little bit of dialogue, and bam, quest is complete. So while not super in depth in the things you do, the rewards they give you are what really shine. The rewards boil down to this: it's going to be new vestiges for you to have in your runs. And vestiges, as talked about previously, are all about your builds here. So getting new vestiges means, oh, I can make a new build. For example, a new vestige I got is one where it lowers the amount of will reserve I have, so the amount of will I'm getting per turn. However, every single turn, I'm also spawning an orb. So I can pick up that orb, get that will that I've technically lost back, but also lower the cooldowns of my abilities. So it's a trade-off vestige, but man, you could do some crazy stuff with it, especially if you're playing a Moss Cloak. Oh man, you're able to get some really good combos off if you set everything up right. And that feels good. And being able to look ahead at those quest completion rewards and say, oh, that's exactly what I want there. And oh, that vestige could be great with this aspect. And if I got these other vestiges, but then you go, oh, there's also this one I want to unlock, which could let me do this, and so on and so forth. And it's awesome. Every single time I got a new quest, I immediately went to the quest log and was going, okay, what's this vestige going to be? And what can I do with it as it goes on? Oh man, it always got me excited for what was to come next. Now, the other kind of quests that are in the game are specific to each aspect you play as, and these all require you to get all the different ascensions and all the different augments for your bindings on those aspects. Now, when you do that, if you get all of the different augments, that's going to net you a new vestige that's specific to that class. For example, there's one for the Weaver where it casts your constrict ability every single turn, which that's awesome. It is an incredibly good vestige. I love getting it when I play Weaver. But getting all the ascensions for an aspect will actually net you a new cosmetic for that aspect. And that's nice too. I like the aspect of getting cosmetics through quests because, yeah, there is a battle pass, which Michael is going to be talking about. But it's nice to have another way to get them that's more focused on doing a specific thing and rewards you for experimenting with new builds on the aspects. And that's another great thing about these quests, that, hey, now I'm rewarded for trying out these new ways and these new builds that maybe I would have just fallen back into my old habits before.
You might have heard Finn mention seasonal XP, and that might put your thought on a battle pass system or something of the likes. To which you'd be correct. There is a battle pass in this game. However, it is not a crucial part of the game. Thankfully, the devs realized that battle passes are great and all, but they're not great if they hide certain features from the games that you want to be able to get without the battle pass. So, in that wisdom, they made the battle pass cosmetic only. There are 100 total levels in the battle pass, obviously each level containing a new cosmetic. The free version of the battle pass does include cosmetics as well, and they are fairly good too. The paid side, however, has very good cosmetics throughout the entire battle pass. This isn't a bad battle pass in any regards. It's actually a very good one, and considering it's only $8 compared to the normal $10 in other games, I'd say it's worth it if you like the cosmetics. Yet again, however, it is not crucial to overall gameplay and how everything works together. Besides there being a paid battle pass, there's also a cosmetic shop. The cosmetic shop contains, cosmetics for each individual class, and it also contains cosmetics for your character as a whole. There are certain class cosmetics, like for Magma Miner or for Moss Cloak, which are 2 of the 5 classes, and there's just overall cosmetics like for your quill that follows you around or for your footsteps. Everything in the shop is very affordable, considering that about $10 can get you 1,000 shinies, which are the prime currency in the game, and about one item in the shop is, between 300 and 700 shinies. You can get about 2, maybe even 3 things from the shop with $10. Overall, that's not a terrible deal, but yet again, everything is solely cosmetic, and it all depends on how you want to stylize your character.
So, our final thoughts on Inkbound. I really, really love Inkbound. And I know Michael does too. We have an absolute blast every time we sit down to play it, and we get into some ridiculous builds. We have a lot of fun. We go in. It's always a good time. Whether I'm playing a casual run or a ranked run, I always get something out of it. I always feel like I'm accomplishing something. Even if I lose a run, I'm going, okay, I still got some stuff done. Whether it's maybe getting some progress on one quest or getting some more pass XP, it all feels good and it's an absolute blast to play. And man, I cannot wait to see what new aspects they come up with, what new characters get introduced, what new enemies, because to be honest, the only real issue we have right now is that there is a little bit of lack of variety in enemies after a while. Once you've been to, say, the Silent Promenade a couple times, you've seen every single enemy there is to see there, and so you know what you're getting into, which is great from a tactical aspect of being able to know what you're dealing with, but for replayability, it does hurt that a little bit. Especially with only 3 villains in the game right now. You already kind of know after you fought each of them one time what to expect and how to build for them. Which again, don't get me wrong, I like being able to choose a boss at the start and on how to build. My only issue is I now have fallen into a trap where, okay, I'm playing a Weaver, I probably want to face Argalath, and so I go and fight Argalath for the 15th time. Again, overall, we still really enjoyed this game. It's a solid 9 out of 10 for us here at Our Eyes on Indie, and cannot wait to see where it goes in the future. So that's our review of Inkbound. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video, and if you want to keep up to date on all our reviews here at Our Eyes on Indie, make sure to hit the subscribe button as we look to give you reviews every single week on the hottest new indie games, or indie games that maybe you forgot about and didn't realize were getting major updates still. And if you want some straight up gameplay with commentary, go check out our second channel, Our Hands on Indie, where we give you gameplay from our reviews as well as other games that Michael and I find that pique our interest or just genuinely have some fun with. So, until next time, have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll be here with our eyes on Indie.